Ever wondered how AI is working its way into the buildings of the future? I recently had the opportunity to explore this fascinating topic when I was invited to speak at a panel at RealComm in Tampa. The discussion focused on how businesses in the commercial real estate sector could start using AI today. I saw this as a golden opportunity to dive deeper into the industry's transformation. Let's face it, the commercial real estate industry has faced significant challenges in the past 3 years, grappling with the aftermath of COVID-19 and trying to reinvent itself. Throughout the conference, I had the chance to interview a wide range of professionals, each offering their own unique perspective on AI's role in shaping the future of commercial real estate. In this special episode of the Digital at Scale podcast, I'm going to speak with a wide range of perspectives on how AI is changing their focus.
And instead of focusing on, well, what is the quality of the data, who can access the data, how is that permission inheritance happening?
And we dig into some of the current challenges that the industry has always faced in adopting new technologies.
And so they'll make a few changes. And so you're oftentimes having specifications for systems that are decades old. Some of them don't exist anymore.
And find out how Silicon Valley giants like Google are already winning awards with the research they're doing today.
Over time, the agent learns to optimize policy to reduce carbon emission as well as energy consumption.
These unique perspectives showcase how AI is reshaping an industry in flux. From day-to-day operations to cybersecurity, from tenant experience to building infrastructure, we'll journey through the transformative potential of AI commercial real estate. But we first begin our journey with Mona Ghadiri, a Senior Director of Product Management at Bluevoyant. What struck me the most about our conversation was her unique approach to implementing AI. Instead of focusing solely on what AI can do, Mona suggests that companies should start by testing what AI can't do.
Say, is your POC end goal or success criteria having this thing poop something out for you? Or is it showing you that it won't do things you don't want it to do?
This counterintuitive approach could be the key to building trust in AI systems within organizations. By demonstrating the limitations and safeguards of AI, companies can address concerns head-on and pave the way for more confident adoption.
Hi, my name is Mona Ghadiri. I'm a Senior Director of Product Management at a company called Bluevoyant. We're Microsoft's #1 security partner, and I am an expert in SIM and XDR. So I'm here to chat with you about AI. I'm excited.
Yeah, so we've been talking to a lot of people about AI adoption, particularly around security. And in your experience, over this past year and a half, what has that been like when working with different companies? And what are they thinking about when trying to bring in particularly generative AI into the workplace?
Definitely. I think there's two camps. There are people who are like, I want to build my own cabinets. I'm going to do my own thing. And that's kind of the open AI camp, right? You could think of them as being the ones who want to control all the parts of making their own dinner or building their own cabinets or whatever. And then there's another group of people who say, you know what, my expertise isn't in AI. I'm an expert in shoes. I'm an expert in real estate. I'm an expert in whatever. I want someone else to do the cabinets. I want to be the one to tell you, do the cabinets need to be tall enough to fit a cereal box or a tin can? How many do we need to have in here, right? And have a different conversation than about what are the cabinets themselves. I think people are getting lost in the infrastructure conversation. And instead of focusing on, well, what is the quality of the data, who can access the data, how is that permission inheritance happening, right? Are you using things like Microsoft to do those things, or are you trying to do them on your own? And I think as those two camps kind of grow, one is about securing the infrastructure and how do we use existing tools and technologies, whether you're a Splunk shop or a Microsoft shop or whatever, to manage and monitor the infrastructure or monitor the users using the infrastructure. But then you also have the concept of who's copying and pasting things in and out of these things, right? How can we control the data that is generated by these things? Are those considered IP? And if they are, right, how do we need to protect those in more of a DLP kind of insider risk, kind of consideration instead of this infrastructure problem? And so I think depending on what their appetite is for security and how much they want to do, folks are falling in one of each of these camps. And then as they kind of consider their options, I think the cost and who's going to use it and that return on investment conversation kind of goes to the front instead of it being, oh, well, if we plug these things in, we're going to get something. Wouldn't that be cool?
You bring up a lot of really good points. I love the analogy of do you want to build it yourself and build that cabinet, or do you want to, rely on the professionals who do this every day?
Like an Amish cabinet, come and build them for me. I want to focus on what's inside, right? And I think for me, right, I'm a DevOps person, and I'm sitting here saying that because I know just how much goes into, I have to update the model, I have to update the permissions, I have to stay on top of who's accessing all of this. It's a lot. I don't want to do that. I've got enough other things to do trying to run a security operations center. So for me, it's way more valuable to have somebody like Microsoft or some other third party managing the SaaS application of the LLM, right? Instead of me trying to put it all together and somehow make really nice cabinets when that's not really my expertise.
Yeah, one of the things I think that I've found is that it's very good, easy to do a POC, but hard to put into production. And a big deal of that is around data governance. And you talked a lot about that earlier. What have you seen work, and what is kind of like the first step of, making sure that you have the right data governance? Because companies weren't really great at it to begin with. And now that you have something that's producing an infinite amount of data, how do you even begin?
I think there's conversation around structured and unstructured data, right? Because the LLM will do better with structured data than unstructured data in some cases, or you have to put a ton in to get the unstructured data to a semi-structured or structured kind of place. So if you're starting from there, that's one thing. If you're starting from a retention place, right, with governance, I think that's almost a different conversation, right? How long do I need to keep the data for? Who has access to the kept data? Where is it being kept and stored, right? I think is kind of where people get stuck with governance. I think it's easy to say, oh, these are the first 5 people who are going to use it. And they're going to use it on these data sets that they already have access to. But to your point, right, as this data sprawls, the answers and what the LLM generates to me are where the governance conversation needs to start instead of retention or access, where is the data structured or unstructured?
Yeah, it's a really good point, because you're now having data and content, as being like a CEO, you kind of want to know what was generated by humans, what was generated by AI.
They store it, right? Because to me, I think there's still a lot of conversations around is if I ask a very specific question and that results in the creation of IP, right? How that IP is transferred, kept, whatever, right? There are all of these other kind of tendrils that touch these things that haven't really been a problem before, because we've never, to your point, created this much data at the rate that we're creating it in like the history of time. Right? Even like we're blowing through like YouTube and like a lot of these like foreign companies and like all the stuff they were doing to scale out storage. Like we've blown past a lot of those with how much data, AI is generating. You can see that in NVIDIA's stock, right? Their stock went up like crazy, right? So I don't think it's an anomaly.
If you were advising a company, get started, hey, we just don't even know where to start, what would you advise companies to do first?
I think the use cases and the personas is first, right? So I need to come up with my team. Who's going to help me with the Lord of the Rings? Like, where's my axe, right? I want that guy on my team, right? So for me, it's like, who are the 3 or 4 different personas that we can grab onto and say, maybe we all are a team. Maybe we all have the same outcomes. Maybe we can agree on a couple of use cases or designs or whatever that will satisfy all of our needs, right? Because it's never going to be one entity within an organization that's going to be able to make enough of an ROI justification for something like AI. It has to be done as a cross-functional thing. You got to talk to the legal people up front. You got to talk to the infrastructure people up front. And if you don't have that cross-functional team, it's not going to go anywhere, right? I think the second consideration is, what is that first milestone, right? Is it the data? Is it the access? Is it the, can we get something from A to B, right? I think that problem of trying to do something from A to B in that POC story is where people stick, that governance stuff gets really sticky. So if there's a way to kind of compress it or make it into a smaller milestone, I think that also really helps. Hey, we proved that nobody who shouldn't have access to this doesn't have access. What a great milestone, right? That's a win. And we didn't have to generate a thing from the AI, right? We just had to prove that it wasn't doing things, right? I'm serious, right? Some of those things are just as valuable as showing that it works, right? So I guess I would push people to say, is your POC end goal or success criteria having this thing poop something out for you? Or is it showing you that it won't do things you don't want it to do? Because I think almost in that case, those negative, keeping me from negative implications is almost more important than proving the thing can start and stop.
Yeah. I mean, you can enter anything as a prompt and it'll give you something back. It's whether or not your data is good.
Is your prompt good, right? Do you have the right context? Yeah. Otherwise, what I said up there is you can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. And I still believe it, right? Like if you give the AI bad data, don't be mad at the AI that it gave you a bad response. Look at the layer 8 problem, right? That's sitting between you and the keyboard and and think about, how are you trying to shape that? Or how is someone else's job to make sure that those are shaped properly so that when they come to me, I'm not the one thinking about it.
And you talked a little bit about, that there's a company-wide initiative. You can't just be working in these silos because marketing has their use cases and personas, engineering, customer experience and support. And the larger the company, the harder it is to do these cross-functional things. And this has caused a lot of paralysis in the industry because security has their say, legal has their say, all the ICs.
Everything and terrified about, what goes bump in the night. But yeah, I think where I see people struggling the most is really trying to envision what it's not going to do. Right? People are so stuck on what is this going to do for me? What is it going to do for me? Tell me what it's not going to do. Tell me how I'm protected, and you're going to change the narrative within the organization. So then people in legal are like, oh, wait, you're trying to make sure this doesn't do things? That's what I want, right? Instead of I'm trying to prove that this thing does a thing that I know you don't understand, right? Which is just, again, going to give you those negative outcomes. When I'm talking to a development team or those kinds of folks, right, usually they're more eager to adopt, and they're like, give it to me, I'm ready, right? Like, who cares if anybody's pen tested this thing? Like, whatever. And I think for those, like, there has to be a route for early adopters. Saying no is not an answer because people will go around and figure out a way to get what they want, right? If we make the easy thing the right thing, right, then there are fewer likelihoods that someone is going to try to nefariously put data somewhere where it shouldn't be or try to use an online chatbot. So you're asking me about what could someone do, like small pieces. I'm a Microsoft person. They put a ring on it. I'm just going to call it like how it is. But what Microsoft has is what they call AI hub for Purview. And there's a couple of one-click policies that you can just do you want people to be able to engage with other chatbots on the internet? Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe in a controlled way. For where I work at Bluevoyant, we stood up our own OpenAI instance, and we're doing the cabinets building ourselves methodology. And we happen to be a firm that has a DevOps practice, and it's part of business, and it's just another resource to them. So for us, that having that easier route to adoption of saying, oh, well, what if we just show you that it's not going to do this? I'll show you it won't give me data I'm not supposed to have. How does that make you feel, right? I think coupling those two things together of a couple of one-click policies and then showing people that this won't do things actually goes a long way.
That's a really good point. I mean, because then it just gains trust. And I think that's the biggest thing that's lacking in this is trust.
It's going to give you a good answer ever, but I can control whether or not you shouldn't get an answer.
Yeah.
As a security person, I better be able to control that, right? That's one of the benefits of Copilot for Security is it's inheriting all of your Entra ID permissions, right? So if I shouldn't have access to the answer, it's going to tell me I don't have access, right? In the OpenAI model, somebody or something has to be doing that governance because you're giving the machine level access or SPNs, right? Managed identities, other kind of wonky non-human users, right? Which make it a little bit more a little harder to control.
Yeah, you can put any data on it, but you want to make sure that governance around it is secure because you give any data to an LLM, it's going to do something with it.
It doesn't know. And responsible AI to them is I don't want to have porn shit come back to me, right? They're not thinking about, well, what if I actually do have a use case where I'm a hospital or a domestic violence center and I do need to use those words, right? Today, some of those governance things are overkill because I can't control it. And it does cut out some people from being able to take advantage of that pre-made solution. So I think the governance and that knob is not there yet in AI for us to be able to say, oh, I want to crank it up to 11. Right. Or, I'm comfortable with it being added to.
You bring up a really good point about the different models and kind of that tweaking. Have you seen, I guess, and you talked about OpenAI, but there are a lot of other models there and there's bias in the model about what it won't. For instance, you said, if you're working with domestic violence or something that actually needs to talk about things that are prohibited. How do you see, more sensitive or those types of companies? Are they using different models or what are you seeing?
They're not using any models, right? Because what they're seeing is I'm lack the granularity to control what is good or okay based on my code of conduct within my organization, right? I think this is a maybe easier thing to do if you're building your own LLM. You can feed it your code of conduct and say, this is what I expect of you. And these are the rules and the governance that's associated with that. But, if you're building that, you're taking that model that's already built, right? You're giving up that for convenience, right? So I think, unfortunately, it means that maybe a domestic violence group would have a really great time using this because they really need the help, right? But they will be turned off for a lot of these compliance reasons or for PII or whatever. So I think there is a ton more opportunity in other models, other things to give this granularity and control because it really isn't readily available on the market. Unless you're buying enterprise CIEM tools where you're really talking about access and permissions on a much broader scale than more specific to these, what goes in and out of the prompt.
All Well, thank you so much for your time. And if our audience wants to get a hold of you for any advice, how would they get a hold of you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Mona Ghadiri, the only one out there. Or you're welcome to email me, mona.ghadiri@bluevoyant.com.
Well, thank you very much. So we've just heard the security-first approach that Mona offers, and now we're going to shift gears to see how AI is being used on the ground level. Our next conversation was Mark, account executive at Building Engine. Mark's experience offers us a fascinating glimpse into how AI is not just an abstract concept, but a practical tool that's already transforming day-to-day operations in the commercial real estate industry. One of the most intriguing aspects of Mark's interview is his discussion of JLL GPT, a specialized AI tool developed specific for the commercial real estate industry. This tool just represents a growing trend we're seeing across various sectors, where the development of industry-specific AI models trained on specific knowledge bases is the wave of the future. These tailored AI assistants are designed to understand the nuances and complexities of particular industries, and it's making them incredibly powerful tools for professionals in those fields. So I'm here with Mark at Building Engines, who's an account executive here. And I would love to know, are you using AI at all at Building Engines? And if so, how?
We are. So, Chat GPT?
Yeah.
We're using that with JLL GPT, essentially. So we're handling that. We're writing things down into the chatbot, and it's performing basically if we need office information about anything office related, anything industrial, retail related. We're using JLL GPT to help us even curate emails like that as well. So it's becoming a very useful tool internally that a lot of people are adopting it. Last statistic that I saw was about 50% of the corporation is using it.
Wow, that's a lot. That's pretty good. So you said JLL GPT. Tell me more about that. What is that?
Yeah, so it's like Chat GPT. You put in anything, like any information into like a little chatbot, and it performs like a full thing, and it's pretty wild. It's like Chat GPT in a way of like if you have say you have a question about office, and you're like, hey, how many occupiers are in this specific building? They'll be able to pull out the land, the specific space of that building. They'll be able to pull out the rent roll, anything like that. So it's pretty wild.
That sounds really useful. So in your role as an account executive, how would you say you use AI? Is it primarily for like responding to emails, writing different things? Well, how would you say you use it?
So right now I'm using it for kind of informational purposes, especially like if I'm trying to really curate an email exactly to where I want it to sound informational, but also coming from me, I'll use that JLL GPT to help me with the office space, the retail side, industrial side, and it'll be able to provide statistics or like new technology that's forming in that space as well too. So JLL's GPT is really helping our business line.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of really good like around research in particular, and it sounds like being able to pull up any information about the building. What was that before GLL GPT? What was that experience like?
So the experience we would use CoStar before, but even if we didn't have CoStar, we would have to like Google it essentially. And now we're just using the GPT formatting, where we're getting the historical data of that building, kind of who developed it, who if it was retrofitted or not, serviced it, anything like that. Who's managing the property right now? Super helpful.
So you mentioned that 50% of the company has adopted. I think with everything now, everyone's usually 50-50 on one side or the other. What's kind of the general sense of maybe from some of the detractors, like why they're not using it? What's kind of some of their feedback of why they haven't adopted it maybe as much?
I'll be completely honest with you. From my just experience alone, I can't speak for everybody, but from my experience, I think just getting the mindset of having AI kind of help you in any sort of way and letting AI kind of take control of it. Because I think as a human being, we like to be in control of things, and for AI to not be, or for us to use AI and having the control in someone else's hands or a technology hands, it's a little bit more, I don't know if we should do that. I don't know, it's a little bit more of like that pain point, I think, of just throwing it there. So, Yeah, AI, I think is going to be the new thing, especially in the industry. It's just take a little bit of time adopting wise. So for everybody,
Yeah, I think trust. I think trust is a big one, but I think also too, as you mentioned, trust.
trust. Yeah, that's great. Put it. I couldn't even think of the word, and that's great. Yeah, trust.
Yeah.
Trust is a big thing, I think, and honestly, letting someone else control that is not something that's easy to let go of.
Yeah, and I think that you have to have trust in the systems. But I think too, have you seen any fears of maybe job displacement? Like, hey, that used to be my job.
Honestly, yeah, but potentially I could totally see that, especially with our, organization where maybe, it's in the finance department, or if there's marketing material or even sales, curated emails to send out to prospects or clients about, hey, we just enhanced this module or this platform, like take a look at it. So yeah, I think there's fear among that around everybody. And I think honestly too, a lot of people are coming around the corner. It's just taking a little bit more time to understand, like, hey, we could trust AI, especially if it's in the right hands too.
Yeah, I think, and depending on which platform, how you can kind of validate and audit that trust as well. So when you first started in bringing in JLL, GPT, or any sort of AI into the system, was that a bottoms up initiative, or was it kind of more top down, or was there like a committee? Like, how did that actually come across?
Great question. So from my standpoint in the organization, it came from top down, and it was coming from the leadership roles. And they were just like, hey, we're building this out. We want you to utilize it. It's really there to utilize as a tool for you. We're not replacing you, obviously. We're there to help you with either your sales functions, your marketing functions, anything really. And ever since then, it's honestly, a lot of people have enjoyed the fact that our leadership team wants us to use it, and they really come home on that fact. It's like they genuinely mean it. They genuinely want us to succeed. They genuinely want us to, utilize it, but not fear it at the same time. So that's
really forward thinking from your leadership, because I think too, one of the things you mentioned, you said you enjoy it. I think they've been doing some recent surveys that say job satisfaction with people that use AI is actually higher than with those that don't. So I guess one last thing, if you had any kind of advice to anyone who might be thinking about trying to use AI in the workflow, how would you recommend just like, hey, how are you going to get over that trust factor?
I would say just try it out, see how it's going to work for you. Because honestly, I was very skeptical when it first introduced. I was very skeptical about ChatGPT. I was very skeptical about JLL GPT. I was skeptical about all AI, even AI where they're taking over buildings kind of in a way of like, hey, we're able to control the temperament, but also be an assistant, and that's generally what it is. It's an assistant. And just having that mindset of understanding that they're not replacing us, they're there to help us, the AI is, and it's really become a game changer in that fact. And I think it's helped my role really expand more in terms of my creativity, because I think it also helps in that creative role too, because sometimes if you're not that creative, you can rely on this function to help you as well.
It's really good advice. I think one of the ways I use it is to be creative with it, because it can help you think of the things you may not have thought of. So it's a great sparring partner a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Brett.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Now that we've heard Mark's perspective on how he uses AI in his daily work, we're now going to turn our attention to how AI is being woven into every single tool that we use, including property management tools. Our next conversation is with Jonathan Kroll, the Chief Product Officer at Visit, a company that is at the forefront of integrating AI into property operation platforms. Jonathan's perspective is particularly exciting because it shows us how AI is not just an add-on, but is becoming a core feature in the products that drive building management.
But actually, we've implemented our first AI feature even before ChatGPT was released.
This proactive approach to AI integration just shows how the industry is actively seeking to find solutions to some long-standing challenges. And what's particularly intriguing about John's work is how it's being used to enhance the tenant experience and to streamline operations. He mentions using AI for tasks like routing work orders or escalations and setting priority, which were previously rules-based systems. Now, with AI, these processes are becoming much smarter and more responsive to real-time needs.
Well, I'm here with Jonathan Kroll, who's the Chief Product Officer at Visit.
So Visit, property operation platform or CMMS, depends. There are different multiple names for it. Basically, we provide property teams a platform to manage all the day-to-day inside buildings, whether like maintenance issues, security issues, cleaning issues, all these type of things, but including also the communication with the tenants that lives or work in the building, including amenities reservation. Everything sits under the umbrella of the day-to-day activities inside building. Mainly focused on commercial office buildings, but also a bit on industrial, bit of residential, but our core of focus is commercial.
So the past year, we've seen a big uptick in generative AI. How are you looking at using generative AI in commercial real estate and kind of like property management?
Okay, so yeah, in the last year, AI became my buzzword. But actually, we've implemented our first AI feature even before ChatGPT was released. We worked with different other modules and in-house resources that we can use in order to build the first feature in the platform. But now when it becomes such an accessible for it's great tools out there that we are implementing what there is out there in the market right now. Basically, what we see as the most beneficial approach when it comes at least to our world is that there is a lot of workflows that happen today inside building, which are either simple or very manual. For example, like a routing of work orders or escalations and setting priority, which are like a rule-based if-then scenarios. That's how it was till now. And now we're utilizing AI in order to make this type of workflows much more smarter, AI-based, based on different parameters in order to enhance the experience for the tenants in the building.
Got it. So using it to kind of, it sounds like document management, kind of helping with those types of tasks.
But also work orders, tenants that creates work orders, and this type of work orders might get escalated because of negative sentiment. Some work order needs to receive higher priority because this tenant is, more angry than other tenant. So AI really helps in order to set the priority and escalate the issues.
So like customer experience, making sure that people are well supported. I guess, how are you using it internally for your own like business operations outside of like, are you using ChatGPT or using other tools and as part of just your normal business operations as well?
Yeah, so we mainly use ChatGPT. I think at the beginning it was like, something that people use it quietly, but now it's became a standard. Like, guys, we all use ChatGPT. Don't hide it. It's fine. It helps, from the smallest emails to the largest one to brainstorming. So actually, to be honest, for now, only ChatGPT, like we don't have a company-wide implementation of AI yet side of this.
How, so in terms of security, when you're talking to different clients, anytime AI, no matter what context, it's like security, lawyers, like everyone's like, What's been your experience with both doing product research for, how you implement AI, but also too, like in your own kind of operations? What's that conversation been like?
Yeah. So at the beginning, obviously, when we start using, this type of open AI platform, we're really concerned about giving them private data of customers. But what we understood from them is like when you use their paid service, it's something that they are not using private data in order to enhance their models. But on top of that, what we did is just encrypting the data, not providing personal details of customers, but just sharing information that is allowed to be shared there. So that's how we overcome it. Make sure that what we can make sure that our customers and their private details will not be shared externally with third-party tools. And dealing with customers is that when you comply for the higher standards, SOC 2 and this type of, so it's provide a benchmark that's also if you're utilizing AI, so you're fine, because we are being tested also on AI today. and we are still with these standards of security, so it's fine.
And in the next 5 years, where do you see the biggest benefits to AI? Is it in the predictive modeling and valuations? Is it operational efficiency? Is it building automation? Where do you kind of see that kind of having the most impact in the CRE world?
Yeah, it's hard to guess, let's say, and you mentioned multiple. It can be in all of the above. Let's say I can speak only mainly from our side because we are a tool that is being used by the people inside the building. We're not sitting in the back end. The people that operates the building use us. I believe the way I see it, it's not mainly from the biggest stuff. The day-to-day activity, if you can streamline the type of workload that I just mentioned, from the routing of the workload, the escalations, things like that, or even streamlining the day-to-day activities, helping them creating a work order in 2 seconds, help them to automatically answer a tenant which is angry using the AI. This type of simple stuff, I think that they are the ones that will really help practically in the next 5 years at least.
Got it. And I guess from AI adoption internally, what would you say a percentage of the people that use AI, and of the people that don't, what would you say their biggest challenges, or what their biggest reason why they're not?
And we're speaking about ChatGPT now?
ChatGPT, or just when you're hearing that we're going to use it, either ChatGPT internally or different AI models, what's kind of that let's hold off, or I'm not ready for that?
Yeah, I think in every product there are early adopters for it. ChatGPT is different because it was adopted so drastically in a short amount of time. So from the people that in the company that are not currently use it, is the type of people that they like the way they do things today. That's how they write email, that they search Google to find answers. Really, that's what they feel. They don't want to change they're very used to it. Old habits die hard. So that's the type of people. And the more curious one, the more tech savvy ones, they are the ones that are very curious and adopting it.
So one last thing, are there any amazing features we should look out for on Visit coming up that the audience would be interested in?
Yeah, I mentioned here a lot AI-based workflows. So we are going to release more stuff like that, whether it's as I mentioned, more escalations type that we believe our users or the people that operate the building need to get aware of. And also when it comes to help them just to prioritize their tasks using AI. So this is a feature that we're currently working on. And also analyzing all the feedback they get from their customers, from their tenants, in order to give them a more accurate feedback, image of what's the sentiment when it comes to their customers, also using it.
Yeah, sentiment analysis is a big one. You got to find the angry customers versus the happy ones.
In our case, it's hard because most of the requests that are being submitted are, negative sentiments. People are complaining about something, but that's why it takes, much more work in order to extract things and make.
No one reaches out to support to say, you're doing a great job.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate your time, and best of luck. All right, thank you.
We now shift our focus to the broader challenges and unique dynamics of the commercial real estate industry. Our next conversation is with David from FPC Global, and it's a real eye-opener about the complexities of implementing new technologies in this industry. David's perspective is particularly fascinating because he sheds some light on something we don't often consider, and that is the misaligned incentives that can really hinder technological advancement in the commercial real estate sector.
The person who owns the building isn't the person who operates in the building, who is the person who leases the building and uses it. Those are different actors, right?
This fragmentation of roles and responsibilities creates a complex web of interests that don't always align when it comes to implementing new technologies. And what's more, David highlights a critical challenge that many in the industry face: the lack of data. You can't leverage AI without good data, and in many cases, that data simply isn't being collected or isn't accessible. But what really caught my attention was David's insight into the industry's historical approach to technology.
And we're seeing that. And so there's relatively new for the industry, language that we use, BACnet, Modbus, these kind of, and some are more popular in certain regions of the world. The inevitable goal is to get to IP addressed APIs.
I was genuinely shocked to hear that APIs, a technology that's been standard in my industry for decades, is still considered new in the commercial real estate sector. The fact that this transition is still ongoing in 2024 speaks volumes about the unique challenges the commercial real estate industry faces in modernizing its technological infrastructure.
I'm here with David Stoller from FPC Global, and we're going to be talking about a little bit of AI in building operations. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
So we're an organization that focuses specifically around the kind of the gap in the market between underneath the software and above the hardware in the operative world. So anywhere operative technology, things that are physically driving, changing, making the world work, whether it's a motor, a lighting, electrical, building automation, industrial automation, manufacturing automation, and software intercede. We specialize in kind of making that connection, deploying it at scale, and then ensuring it's done securely and works right.
Yeah. So being able to like take what happens in digital world, but bringing it to the physical world through that.
Taking what's happening in the physical world and replicating it in the digital world and providing insights, and then inversely driving changes down into the physical world. So capturing what's happening with every traffic light in the city and understanding what's happening there and how that affects traffic patterns, and then being able to remotely make dynamic changes, right? So that's an example where we're taking physical world infrastructure, operative technology, connecting it to the internet, right? Creating internet technologies where internet's really, software is great at analyzing, providing insights, but then driving that back down. There's a gap in the market where people don't know how to connect those things. The operative world is very complex and a lot of legacy, proprietary protocol and communication systems. And the software world is really new and fresh and well-designed and purpose-built. And so connecting those two things can be a challenge. So that's what we specialize in.
I recently just had that on my way to the airport coming to this conference. I was like, why are the traffic lights not more well-timed? Like, what are some of those challenges? I mean, like you said, everything in the software world is kind of purpose-built. We're now talking about legacy systems. What has been that kind of challenge over the last 30 years, becoming technological, getting into the technological and software realm?
Certainly, yes. So I think, one of the biggest challenges is the physical world's been with us for a very long time, and the technology stack around us dates back a lot longer than the internet, ostensibly. And so for the longest time, the way organizations created strategic advantages was by creating walled cities around their technology. And so they would use proprietary systems, proprietary protocols, and this would insulate them from losing their client to a competitor in some capacity, right? And the reality is, for the most part, these organizations make hardware and they sell hardware, but their real goal is to sell service agreements, maintaining and managing and ensuring that those things operate properly. And so the way that you're able to do that is not allowing anyone else to be able to service it, because legally they're not allowed to touch your communication protocol. And so for the last 30 years, that's slowly been eroding. I think clients are making demands to be more open, and we're seeing that. And so there's relatively new for the industry, language that we use, BACnet, Modbus, these kind of, and some are more popular in certain regions of the world. The inevitable goal is to get to IP addressed APIs, but it can be a challenge. And some of these organizations that are responsible for it, they're industrial giants. I know we tend to think of big tech as, Facebook, Azure, Microsoft, whatever. But big tech, industrial tech is industrial giants like Schneider, Schindler. And so the people that are building these massive industrial automation factories or these giant wind turbines that are powering green energy, they're these legacy companies that have been using these old protocols forever. And so it's hard to shift and change them over time. Right? So.
And I can imagine too, now that we have AI in the mix, everyone's like AI, AI, AI. It's not like AI has been new, but now generative AI. And when an AI makes a mistake and it writes a bad blog post, no one dies. However, in the real world, if something happens, there's a real life consequences. So you have to naturally be slower to adopt. How have you seen that adoption, and how long has this space been using other forms of AI and machine learning to help with that?
So we've been doing it for a long time, honestly. A linear regression model is technically AI as machine learning, right? So in that sense, yeah, I would not consider it a true AI in the modern sense. But we've been using linear regression models to make predictions and analyze what needs to happen or when things might fail, whatever, right? For a long time, for decades at this point. The real kind of more shiny parts of AI, the challenges that we're seeing it's functionally that connectivity, right? There's a lot of risk associated with connecting the physical world because of malicious actors. It's one thing when someone gets in and gets your email and they find out that you've been subscribed to some awful newsletter that you're embarrassed about. It's a lot different when someone into Hoover Dam and shuts off the generators and all of Nevada loses power, right? And so there's a lot more risk associated with the physical world. It actually, I kind of a dig about it, but like it actually impacts our lives. Like the operative technology world is how we interact with the world. The way we get our water, it's the way we make all of our goods. It's the way that we get our electricity. It's the way that we cool our buildings. It's the way we keep our food safe, right? In refrigeration. And so
how we power computers to even make the software.
Right. So, people are understandably like nervous about connecting to the net. And so that's the first step. And so you can't run AI on it unless you're connected. But I always argue, and people say, well, we don't want to connect because we don't want to. Well, if you're not connected, you don't actually know if someone else is doing it. And that's the challenge is, these are not monoliths, these organizations. The person who owns the building isn't the person who operates in the building, who is the person who leases the building and uses it. Those are different actors, right? And so they all have different goals, different incentives. And so if I'm trying to protect my asset and not connect to it, or whatever the case may be, whatever operative technology, that doesn't mean that the person who's managing and maintaining it in the local office isn't doing it because he makes his life easier, right? So without actually having connectivity, you don't know if someone else is. So if you think about some of the largest hacks that have happened in the last decade, right? Target, MGM, those were all originated in operative technology systems that were connected to the network, right? Without approval, right? So I think MGM was like a salinity monitor in a fish tank that some local tech had put in because it made his life easier. And Target was it was actually an executive's Nest thermostat in his house. And he was getting onto the network remotely. And so they went in because it was an unsecure device. And so I think the importance of connecting and monitoring the operative technology is incredibly important. It is a little risky, but we have to do it because because of the way it's happening organically is dangerous. And so from an AI perspective, that's the first step. So the next challenge, I think the reason that's been a challenge though, is the way that the built world comes to exist. And there are several different stakeholders involved and they all have different incentives, right? So you have a real estate developer, person who builds these buildings. They're functionally speculators, right? They're like, I think if I do this, it'll get this and I'll be able to generate this return, right? It's a speculative investment. They want to build it for as cheap as possible. And the way you do that is you scale back capabilities inside of the actual building process, right? So if I'm going to build this building, I can build it. I can build a dumb building. I can build a smart building. I can build a state-of-the-art. If I build a dumb building, it's cheaper, right? And so that's what happens in a lot of cases.
Cheaper to build, more expensive to maintain, though?
Absolutely. But that's not what they're responsible for. They sell the building, and then you build into what's called the asset manager, the ownership group. They're responsible for maintaining that. So most construction people, most developers build and then sell. They build the core and shell, they get it ready, and they sell it to somebody else. And then there's these organizations called like REITs or even family offices. They buy the asset, have a tenant in it, and they use it as a cash flow. They use cash flow from these rentals to kind of structure it as a bond, a REIT, a real estate investment trust. So these people own these assets. Oftentimes they may just own it on paper, and then they lease out to what's called a service provider, someone like Cushman Wakefield, Jones Lang LaSalle. They operate and maintain the building. So they're often 3 people removed from the actual building of that building. Right? And so to have done it right, make it ready, the decision was back here, and the person who deals with the consequences is here. And that's why oftentimes you have people connecting on their own because it makes their life easier. But now that whole system is at risk because they connected it in an unsecured way.
Yeah. So, sounds like a lot of misaligned incentives.
That's exactly what it is. And that's just the nature of the physical world. I mean, we've had this massive innovation spike in human history, right? In the last 15, 20 years. We've been building buildings centuries. Yeah. And so
almost
the
long civilization.
Yeah, right? Like it's kind of what defines civilization. Yeah. And so, the way that we build them and the order in which people are responsible for things is often due to, we do structure first because you need a structure. Then you start doing, roofing because we're better at roofing. And then you do plumbing because, oh, now we've invented plumbing. So plumbing's now in charge, And so the order at which we do things and add into our process is often not necessarily the right decision, right? Oftentimes when we build it, the last thing that goes in is the software guy, the tech guys, the network guys. They come in at the end, everything's already been done. Some of this stuff is not accessible, it's behind walls, but that's because they were the last to be invented.
Yeah.
So what we really need to do is people are always like, oh, do we have the right thing? We have enough tech. We can send people to the moon. We have everything we need to achieve the goals that we want from our assets today. We just do. What we lack is people and processes, organizational readiness to be able to understand how you can use AI, and processes to ensure that it gets deployed in the way that you want it for the goal that you're trying to achieve.
When you're building a building, when you're making the plans, you're doing it not even based off the technology that's out right now. You're doing it off probably even 5-year technology that's well and solidified, if that. And therefore, by the time the building gets built, the technology or anything that was in there is probably planned for. I mean, is that an accurate assumption?
I wish it was. The reality of these misaligned incentives, so we can get into the real nitty gritty if you like. So you have a developer, they're the money. They're the guys, they raise the money, they're speculating. They hire an architect, part of the design. The architect's job, oftentimes they're very aesthetically driven, experientially driven. They tend to look at the actual technology goes as the responsibility of the engineer. And so the way everyone here makes money is the developer, they build for a certain dollar and they sell it for more. That's just straight up what they do, right? That's how they make
They're mainly just finance,
They're
like
just finance,
buying
They
a
want
stock.
10%. Yes, exactly, right? They're making an investment, they're turning around and returning theirs. The architect has a service fee, they're retained, right? So they get job, they know they're gonna work on it. The engineer has documents they need to deliver. So they're gonna go, oh, it's this big, this many systems, I need 100 hours, whatever, we'll say 10 just for a second. And the way they make more money, they work less hours. And the way that they can do that is they can outsource the actual design of a lot of these subsystems to either the people who built them, which they do for free. So if you say, hey, I need a mechanical system, and you call the big mechanical company Train, they will design your mechanical equipment. They'll size it for you. And guess what they'll also do? Make sure it's all Train equipment. When you need controls and you ask Siemens to do it, they're going to make sure it's all Siemens. It's just the way the business has worked. Or if they don't want to do that, if they want to be really cost effective, they'll go find a plan from 5 years ago that they already did that's a similar footprint and just copy it. And so they'll make a few changes. And so you're oftentimes having specifications for systems that are decades old. Some of them don't exist anymore. And when you do that, you end up kind of what I call like the MVP, the minimum viable product to deliver what needs to be done.
So I hear a lot of proprietary and do-it-ourselves kind of like in the ethos here. Now, when it comes to LLMs, AI, is that kind of same ethos? Like, oh, we just got to do it ourselves. We have to keep it in our own area. Because none of these companies are really, maybe like a Siemens, it's like, huge. They may have the resources, but what are you kind of seeing in the industry?
So I think a lot of people like to think that they're going to do it themselves, and God bless them. I personally think there's a point where you just need to accept that you're good at what you're good at and not good at what you're not good at. And that doesn't mean that there aren't smart people at all these organizations. But the ability to develop ground up large language model versions of AI when your job has been turning wrenches and rolling trucks for the last 50 years is kind of absurd, right? Like, I don't ask the plumber in my house doesn't come in and be like, hey, have you considered my large language model? No, right? Not to be dismissive, right? There's a lot of really brilliant people. I love these organizations. They're my friends, I work with them. I used to work for them, but it's just not necessary. These are large organizations that make money a very specific way. And the way they make money is putting equipment in the building and then rolling trucks to go service it. And so all of a sudden they're going to build a large language model to mitigate that. There's a lot of political challenges that come along with that.
Because it could reduce their service business.
If it reduces it could make it more profitable, sure, but it means I have to lay off people. And maybe the person whose job it is to make that decision, their power is dictated in many ways by how many people they have, right? I control a team of 10,000 people and this many assets. That's how I retain my prestige. I'm the service manager. And if you were to undermine that and turn it into a small group, politically, does that person want to make that happen? Are they incentivized? Like, yes, from a financial perspective, but from a prestige perspective, I don't know if they are. So I think there's a lot of political stuff, and we need to look into the human psychology of what drives these changes and adoption a little bit more scrutiny.
So I'll end it on this last one. When I think of AI as taking over buildings, my mind goes to 2001 Space Odyssey. Like, sorry, Hal, I can't do this. Me even being an AI, I'm like, I still get a little like kind of like nervous. I don't know why about that, but being someone who's in the industry, why is or isn't that not going to happen?
So there is a product, there's some stuff already out there, right? Like I know guys over at Brainbox have a building AI that'll do that. It'll tell you what's going on with your equipment. The challenge though is still, you need to, it only knows what it's connected to, right? You know, the AI isn't going to walk in and magically learn. If you walk around your house, you walk around your office, how much of that is actually IP addressable today? And the cost of doing it is pretty challenging. And the value proposition hasn't been fully ironed out. And so I don't think we're there yet. I think the first step, and I know this is AI and we love talking about AI, but I'm personally sick of this industry talking about AI when they don't have connectivity strategies, data ontology strategies, data aggregation and analysis strategy. Like it's like, you know, that meme of the kid like stepping 3 steps over, and it's just, we need to just build a process to do the first things. And the reality in my, like, I know enough about AI that it's data hungry. Well, we don't even have data. Like, I mean, we're not going to be able to train these systems. You know, if we started connecting every single thing today in every single one of these buildings, and it took us 5 to 10 years, and then we had an AI at the same time at the end of those 10 years, it would be trained out in a week, right? It's still, it wouldn't even be ready because it needs so much more data. So I think we're just light years. We can do some things, but to have that real like future end states building that's dynamically adjusting, like we just need to collect more data. Yeah, and that's just the reality.
I think that a lot of industries, a lot of people, a lot of companies weren't great at data management even before AI. Now you have this thing that's both can collect the data, but also can generate data on unprecedented scales. And I think all industries.
And that's another thing. It's like, you know, when we're dealing with the physical world, is synthetic data a good choice? Is that okay? It's one thing if, you know, we're trying to teach it on how to like write, you know, interpret words or books, you know, like that's one thing, and it's going to spit back a blog post for you. But if it's being trained on synthetic data that inadvertently causes the refinery to explode, you know, like that's.
I think there's a middle ground too between synthetic data and then real data, is because I think a lot of companies have unstructured data, and then using the AI to create the structured data that then powers their prediction models and things like that, so where it is semi-synthetic, but it's based off of their own, and then still meticulously looked at with a fine-tooth comb. You have to validate it for sure.
I mean, I think the one thing I would just echo, like anyone who's interested in doing, like if you're a CEO and you want to talk about AI, let's put a plan together to actually capture the data right now. Like let's put the money where the mouth is. If this isn't just a talking point, if you fundamentally believe that this is of strategic importance to your organization and what you're going to do to be successful in the future, I personally think it is. But if you do as well, come on, let's put together a data aggregation strategy. Let's build it. Let's go. And you know, a lot of people will say, "Oh, we get it." Do you?
Yeah.
Or is it an Excel file that some guy in a basement's filling out? Because I'm so sick of all these Excel files. Like the truth is, we're not capturing any of this stuff effectively today. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David. I really appreciate it, and good luck.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So now that we've heard some of the challenges the industry is facing, we now are going to turn our attention to the cutting edge of AI applications in the commercial real estate industry. And in our final conversation with John, a senior staff engineer from Google AI, who recently won an award for the best use of AI in intelligent buildings. John's insights offer a glimpse into the future of what's possible when advanced AI techniques are applied to building management. What fascinated me the most about John's talk was his detailed explanation of their data collection processes and the sophisticated machine learning techniques that they're employing. It's clear that Google is pushing the boundaries of what's possible in this space.
So the problem is we collect so much data from so many devices, but none of it's labeled. None of it is like, oh, this is good or this is bad.
Right.
So we have to make some changes to basic classification techniques. So
this approach allows their AI systems to continually learn and optimize building operations in real time. But what really caught my attention was how they're using generative AI to help their technicians make sense of the vast amounts of data that they're collecting.
Generate root cause explanations to say, oh, well, if you look at the differential pressure here, and if you look at the supply air temperature here, you might have a broken valve.
This use of AI, not just for data analysis, but for translating that analysis into actionable insights for human technicians, is the future of AI, in my opinion. It's a perfect example of how AI can augment human expertise rather than replace it.
So we're here with John from Google, who just won an award at RealComm for Best Use of AI in Intelligent Buildings. So tell us a little bit about what you did to get the award.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to talk. Basically, there are two ideas, two concepts. One is optimal control, and the other one is intelligent diagnostics. So in optimal control, we believe what we can do with intelligent control of particular parts and set points in the building is to achieve at least a 5% or better reduction in energy consumption and emission. We want to reduce our carbon footprint with the buildings we have without changing a lot of the infrastructure and be able to scale that across the fleet. So we are applying reinforcement learning, which is a type of machine learning that takes an action or takes in a state, generates an action, and gets a reward. And over time, the agent learns to optimize a policy to reduce carbon emission as well as energy consumption. The other thing that we're pushing is the idea of intelligent diagnostics. So let me explain that a little bit. And we developed this over time working with our technicians, our HVAC technicians at Google. So we thought we needed to detect devices that are broken, and that was it. And the technicians came back and said, oh, that's not enough information. We don't need just an alert. We need more explanation. So they said, okay, well, maybe we can get the symptoms. So we employed explainable AI for that, explainable AI techniques to extract from the model the features that are most important. And that turns out to be very much like symptoms, like a patient goes to a doctor and explains their symptoms. And the third piece is, now that you've got the symptoms, you need an expert to explain and reason about the root cause of the problem. And so this is where we're actually applying Gemini with its ability to reason and generate causal explanations and generate root cause explanations to say, oh, well, if you look at the differential pressure here, and if you look at the supply air temperature here, you might have a broken valve. Rather than giving just those values, it actually goes and extracts root cause explanations as to what is potentially wrong with the device. So those are the two things we're working on at Google: optimal control and intelligent diagnostics.
So you're essentially using an AI to get the signals, so to speak, of, hey, what are the things that are causing this? And then you use the Gemini to then decipher that to kind of like, here's my expert opinion. And this is all based off a corpus of data that you're kind of collecting over time?
Massive quantities of data, unlabeled data. So the problem is we collect so much data from so many devices, but none of it's labeled. None of it is like, oh, this is good or this is bad.
Right.
So we have to make some changes to basic classification techniques. So we turn it into an anomaly detection problem by using this idea of noise contrastive estimation. And it's a technique that's been around since about 2010, but never really employed with deep learning. So we did that. And as a byproduct of using a deep learning solution, we can then apply a technique called integrated gradients, which provides us explainability in terms of what's wrong with this observation. And then that explanation is then extracted and we create a prompt, and that gets forwarded on to Gemini and say, here's a bunch of symptoms. There's a bunch of problems here with this device. Can you kind of explain that to me and tell me what I need to do to fix it? And we found that technique is working pretty well.
It sounds like you have to do a lot of data processing, a lot of things before you even send it to Gemini, which I think is lost. Yeah, they need a lot of people when they first start using, Gemini or OpenAI, they're like, oh, just send it this unstructured data, and oh, why is it returning bad results? So how much work would you say goes into the actual data collection and labeling versus the implementation and getting the results back?
Well, what's very, very important is that you're as descriptive as possible and provide a solid context for the type of device that you're trying to analyze. So if you know it's an air conditioner, you give an explanation about what kind of an air conditioner it is. the specifics of the air conditioner, and then you extract the explainability. Three components of each explanation is the weight or the importance of a feature, the observed value, and the expected value. And you kind of start with the top most important ones, and you work your way down the list until you choose, say, 4 to 5 or something like that. And then at the end, you give it a task to say, all right, evaluate this. What do you think the problem is? And what should I do about it? And so that's kind of the idea behind how we engage with Gemini and how we combine the idea of anomaly detection, explainability, and causal reasoning with large language models.
And you mentioned that you're using an agentic model. Is that correct? Like you have different agents for these different?
So when we talk about agents in smart buildings, we're talking about reinforcement learning agents. So this type of an agent learns from the building. It learns a policy from the building. It says, okay, this is the existing policy. Gets recorded information from the building with the current weather and the actions that were taken by the existing building control vault. And then from there, it tries to optimize on that. It interacts, it builds first a simulation or an emulation of the data, a data-driven emulation. And then from there, it interacts with that emulation to try to achieve a better policy. And so that's the other piece. So now what we're doing with that is we're reducing the amount of energy consumed and the amount of carbon being emitted without actually changing the hardware infrastructure dramatically. So that's how we can achieve near-term large scalability with this kind of an approach.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to change the software than it is to change the hardware for sure. So where do you see this technology going in the future? What's your plan?
Well, thanks for the question. I think, my personal opinion, and I've worked in AI for a long time, I think the next major breakthrough is going to be in optimal control. You're going to see a lot more AI-based control in systems that have a lot of randomness. So not every decision is going to be optimal, but over time, over many decisions, the system is going to be more optimal than more rules-based controlled deterministic systems, because they adapt to kind of the environment, like the outside air temperature, to the occupants. And it responds to that much more than, say, a rules-based approach. And I think what we're going to see in the near term is a lot more AI-based control systems that are kind of addressing these, long-term optimization problems, whether related to energy or sustainability. We're going to see a lot more of that. I think that will be the next chapter in AI, to be honest with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. Congratulations on your award and good luck.
In this episode, we've covered everything from the ground level implementation of AI tools in daily work to the integration of AI into property management platforms. We talked about the complex challenges that this industry is facing adopting new technologies. Finally, how the cutting edge research being done by tech giants like Google is pushing the industry forward. What's clear is that AI is not just a buzzword in this industry. It's a transformative force that's already reshaping how buildings are managed, how tenants are served, and how the entire sector operates. While there are certainly challenges to overcome, potential benefits are enormous. I want to thank all of the guests for sharing their insights and expertise. Their diverse perspectives have given us a comprehensive view of how AI is impacting commercial real estate industry from multiple angles. And if you found this topic of AI and commercial real estate as fascinating as I did, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are there other sectors you'd like me to explore in future episodes? And if you've enjoyed this deep dive, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps continue to bring these videos and in-depth explorations of how AI is reshaping our world. Until next time, keep innovating, keep questioning, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.